Ideas is something that 31 states have had in place. Our state's had it in place for a really long time. It just makes sense. Codifying ballot harvesting, very, very questionable, but obviously something Democrats are very supportive of, but again, something that they think gives them an advantage in elections in the future. Having the taxpayers pay for campaigns in this country. Think about that. Ted Cruz has pointed out that in the first quarter of this year, under this law, the federal government would owe him $30 million for his campaign because of the 6-to-1 match that's called for in this bill. Politicizing and turning the FEC into a partisan organization. If the Republicans were proposing that, can you imagine the outcry from Democrats if Republicans were saying that the 3-3 balance that we have on the FEC, which regulates elections in this country, were going to be flipped to give the Republicans advantage? The Democrats would be screaming. And that's exactly what they're trying to do in this bill. So those are just some of the more unsavory elements of this bill. But it's, again, part of an agenda that the Democrats have that they are trying to jam through, push through, at a time when they ought to be trying to work across party lines after an election that was very divided. You have an even Senate. You have a very narrowly divided House. And it seems to me, at least, that the mandate coming out of that, if there was one, is that the people in this country want moderation, they want balance, they want the Democrats to work with the Republicans here in Washington rather than trying to jam through really bad partisan ideas that constitute nothing more than a power grab that locks in an advantage, a political and election advantage for the Democrats well into the future. So with that, I will yield to Senator Barrasso.
There is a group of us that are going to the White House on Thursday to meet with President Biden to talk about infrastructure. We are coming with a good faith offer, and we're hoping to find common ground on things that the American people would think of as infrastructure: roads, bridges, ports, airports, waterways, and of course in the 21st century, high-speed broadband. We want to do things that will actually help the country move forward. We have no appetite at all for what the Democrats refer to as soft infrastructure. And you know, there are a number of very liberal proposals out there in terms of things that don't fit any definition that I would consider as infrastructure. Things like hundreds of billions of dollars for child care, for senior care, things that are going to add significantly to the cost of any of the proposals that we're talking about. The Democrats who are proposing that are also talking specifically about significant tax raises on the American public. We are talking about physical infrastructure. That's what we're taking to the White House. There is a red line for the Republicans in our proposal to the White House, and that is the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. We will not be touching that, period. That piece of legislation was one that resulted in the greatest economic output of a country, I think, in modern history. Hugely successful. So we're hoping to find a partner in President Biden who wants to work with us to a positive end. If he's only looking to make a photo op out of this in an effort to say he's trying to work with Republicans, that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for a solution that will help our nation move forward.
Last week, while I was on the road in Iowa, I heard over and over again from employers about their difficulties in getting people back to work. And our employers, our businesses across Iowa, they're anxious to get back to their full opening, their full potential, and yet they just can't get there. And the reason that they are citing is that most of their former employees, most of the people that they are trying to get back into work, are receiving more dollars than what they would if they were working full time. So we have folks that are staying home because of the benefits that have been extended from the federal government. So folks, we're ready to get America up and moving. The additional dollars, again, keeping people at home, that was reflected in the jobs report, very dismal report that came out last Friday. Now, I know the Biden administration will say that's not the truth. Well, but putting that out there and saying this is not the truth doesn't make it so. We are hearing from people in Iowa and across the United States that the reason they are not going back to work is because they are paid more to stay home. That's the truth. So I was really excited to see Governor Kim Reynolds of Iowa make that decision today to turn back additional federal dollars for expanded unemployment insurance benefits. Iowa is ready to open the doors. This means we will have more folks going back to work without those expanded benefits. We are ready to do that. Now, the Biden's proposal as well to get people to work is offer up a $2.2 trillion infrastructure plan. Oh, I'm sorry. It's now a jobs plan. Okay, it was infrastructure. Now it's a jobs plan. But those dollars, that plan is spread out over the next 8 years. That's not going to help people right now. So we do have a very well thought through plan that's being proposed by the Republicans. I'm so excited. We have key members that will be meeting with President Biden later this week. And I do hope that he is negotiating in good faith, because this is the way we need to go. This is what Iowans, all Americans expect, is that we will focus their hard-earned tax dollars on actual infrastructure.
As I talk to Floridians, they have two concerns right now. They're concerned about their taxes going up. Joe Biden said he wouldn't raise taxes on anybody making less than $400,000 a year. He's already done it. In their so-called COVID bill, they raised the taxes on the gig workers, the Uber drivers, the DoorDash drivers. So he's already broken his promise. If you look at the numbers, if you look at how much money the Biden administration wants to spend this year, what's going to be is everybody's going to see a tax increase. Everybody making less than $500,000 is going to see at least a $1,600 per person tax increase. That's $16,000 over 10 years. So he has already broken his promise, and you cannot pay for all the things he's paying for with just people making over $400,000 a year. He won't focus on being honest with the American public about the taxes they're going to raise. On top of that, he's not being honest about inflation. Inflation is picking up. Look at gas prices, up over 70 cents a gallon since he got elected. Food prices up. Household goods are up. Diapers are up. And he does nothing about it. So Americans are worried their taxes are going to go up, and they're scared to death of what's happening with inflation. This week we get PPI numbers and CPI numbers. We'll see what's happening with inflation, but it sure appears we're going to have significant inflation because of Biden spending. As you know, we all talked about this state bailout. California announced their budget surplus before the money we're sending them this week, $78 billion. $78 billion surplus, and we're sending money when we have almost $30 trillion worth of debt. This makes no sense. The Biden agenda is higher taxes, higher inflation, and it's going to be horrible for families all across this country. Question?
Senator Ernst, can you explain why you are concerned about the House Republican effort to get rid of Liz Cheney from leadership?
Thank you. I'm not concerned about their efforts necessarily. The House business is the House business. All I'm stating is that if someone has something to say, they should feel okay to say it. All of us have very different thoughts. But my point is, at the end of the day, we should not be arguing about who's saying what. We should focus on unity, coming together, and making sure that Republicans are securing seats in 2022. The American people, they are very tired of what they see going on in the federal government and this march to the left. We are moving our country in the direction of socialism. We need Republicans to stop that. So at the end of the day, we need to unify. We need to come together. House business is House business. But I believe if we need to express something, we should feel free to express it.
Senator Finn, over the weekend, Leader McConnell indicated that an infrastructure package might be in the range of $600 billion to $800 billion. Can you talk about that a little bit? And is $800 billion, how flexible are you on the upper end of this?
Well, I would say that Senator McConnell articulated a view, I think, that probably describes where he thinks Republicans might be able to land. We'll have different views within our conference. I think the bill that Senator Capito put together is somewhere on the $564 billion level, but a lot of it for our members will come down to how it's offset, how it's paid for. And obviously, as was pointed out by Senator Barrasso, we do not want to see the 2017 tax law in any way undone. Raising taxes would be a terrible idea. We had the best economy in a generation prior to the pandemic. A lot of that, I think, had to do with the tax policies that we put in place in 2017. And reversing those, I think, would reverse a lot of the progress and the gains that we've had. And right now, the economy is really poised to take off. Raising taxes on businesses, small and large, on individuals, on farmers and ranchers, would be the opposite thing to do if you're interested in getting growth in the economy, getting people back to work, and getting wages up.
Senator, what is it about a 21% corporate tax rate that makes that number so magical? I mean, if it's 22 or 24, it's still lower than it's been in decades. Why is that number so untouchable for you?
Well, I think part of it is, one, if you do raise it at all. Right now, we're kind of in the middle of the world. If you look at the developed countries in the world, if you raised it to 25, for example, you would put us at the very top when you add in tax or state taxes as well. So it does put us at the very high end, and frankly, 25 would put us, we'd be number one in the world again, which is what we were trying to avoid when we lowered taxes back in 2017 to enable our businesses to be more competitive globally. The other thing, I think, the Democrats obviously would like to undo the whole thing. And if you start with the corporate tax, they're going to want to move to the pass-through taxes, which hits all the small businesses in this country. They've already talked about wanting to undo a lot of the death tax provisions that were incorporated into the 2017 law. I think it's a slippery slope, and they're going to need a lot of revenue to pay for the things that they're talking about doing. So I don't think it stops at the corporate rate.
Senator, what are you looking for out of this infrastructure meeting? What would give you a sense that this was worthwhile, or there's actually something viable to keep talking about?
I think if the president, sits down and listens respectfully, which I think he will do, and I'm sure he has done in past meetings, that would be nice. But I don't think it's enough. I think he has to demonstrate a willingness to sit down with Republican leaders in this area, and a lot of our ranking members are going to be at that meeting tomorrow, or I should say on Thursday. The leadership will be at the meeting tomorrow, and come out and say that he wants to put together a group to actually sit down and see if there's a way we can find agreement on true infrastructure, as defined, I think, as commonly defined by people in this country, and I think most people understand what infrastructure is. They've tried to redefine it to include a lot of other things that I think fall way outside of the bounds of what most people in our English language describe as infrastructure. But if they're interested in an infrastructure bill, there's Republican support for doing it. I think there's probably some flexibility in what that amount is. A lot of it would come down to how it's paid for, how it's offset. But I would like to see the president sit down and express more than just a willingness to listen, but a willingness to take action to work in a bipartisan way to try and get a deal.
Senator, beyond what's happening in the House, is it difficult to remain unified as a party when former President Trump keeps repeating that the election was stolen from him?
Well, I mean, what I've said before, and I mean this, I don't think that relitigating the 2020 election is a winning strategy going forward. I think if we're going to win elections in 2022, we have to be talking about the issues the American people care about. Jobs, the economy, national security, safe neighborhoods, strong borders, energy independence. Those are the types of issues I think that are going to resonate with voters in 2022. And I hope that all Republicans can start looking forward, not looking backward, but talk about what we're going to do to try and improve the lives of the American people, and make an argument for why they ought to put us back in power in the House and the Senate in 2022.
Do you wish Trump would stop talking about it? Stop saying that?
Well, I mean, I don't control what the former president does. Nobody does. But I think in terms of the things that we're going to talk about here, you've heard Senator McConnell say this repeatedly, and I think our members are unified about having an agenda going forward that addresses the issues that I mentioned, and at the same time draws a contrast with the Biden administration and the Democrats' policies, which we think are very counter to growing the economy and creating jobs and building on the economic progress that was made prior to the pandemic. So there's going to be a very clear choice when you talk about elections. To me, are about differences, and the differences couldn't be more clear as we set up and prepare for 2022. But we've got to be looking forward, not looking back.
Senator Thune, on
Thanks,
F1,